Hello, I'm Micah Smith with Denver 7 and welcome to Denver Decides. This community partnership is dedicated to accessible and transparent elections. The partnership includes the League of Women Voters of Denver, Inter-Neighborhood Cooperation, and is presented by Denver 8 TV. Our mission today is to present a ballot issue forum in anticipation of the general election coming up on Tuesday, November 3rd. Among the numerous amendments and ordinance questions on this year's ballot is Denver Measure G. This measure asks voters if the charter of the City and County of Denver should be amended to give the City Council authority to initiate a supplemental appropriations or transfers following consultation with the Manager of Finance. Our format for this forum will follow a basic debate outline with opening and closing statements, cross-examination, and will include responses to questions submitted by the forum organizers. Let's begin by meeting the participants who will present and discuss the pros and cons of Referred Measure 2G. Beginning at my right is Councilwoman Robin Knich, who represents the entire city as one of two at-large members on Denver City Council, and she will be speaking in favor of Referred Measure 2G. And on my left is Mr. Cole Finnegan, who served as both the city attorney and chief of staff for Mayor John Hickenlooper, and currently is the managing partner of the global law firm Hogan Lovells, and he will be speaking against Referred Measure 2G. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will begin with 1-minute opening statements from both speakers. Councilwoman Knich, you're up first, speaking for Referred Measure 2G.
Thank you. Charter Amendment 2G doesn't raise taxes. It wouldn't change how much money the city collects or the fact we have to balance our budget. It simply improves checks and balances on city spending and allows City Council to be more accountable and responsive to you, the taxpayers, when unexpected challenges arise. In Denver, our charter balances power in the adoption of new budgets for the next year. The mayor estimates the money will be collected and proposes city spending. The council has the power under the charter to review, amend, and approve that budget. But when estimates become realities and circumstances change in the middle of the year, as they always do, the balance is missing. The mayor can and does propose transfers and changes mid-year, but City Council, who interacts with our communities every day, cannot propose projects or services to respond to the needs you bring to us, proposals that would require a majority vote and could be vetoed if the mayor disagreed. Voting yes on 2G would allow City Council more proactive opportunities to address your concerns with important guardrails that we'll discuss tonight. Thank you.
And now an opening statement from Mr. Cole Finnegan, speaking against Referred Measure 2G.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you tonight. Let me begin by saying Denver is a well-run city. It has a financial system that has functioned well over the past years, and in particular, in recent times, it's functioned well in a serious time of crisis, which the pandemic is. For example, we recently closed a budget gap of $220 million for the 2020 fiscal year, and I think we closed also a budget gap of $190 million for 2021, with the mayor working in consultation with the city council in meetings that have gone on in past weeks. I simply think this is a change that is not needed and is a solution in search of a problem. Denver is considered to be an excellently managed city. The three bond agencies give us a AAA rating. To my knowledge, we are the only city and county or county that has that rating from all three agencies. I don't think we need to make a change.
And now, Mr. Finnegan, you will have 1 minute for a rebuttal to Councilwoman Knich's opening statement.
I don't have as much a rebuttal to Councilwoman Knich's statement as simply I'd like to have a conversation about what is happening. I understand from my experience in working as the city attorney and as the chief of staff to Mayor Hickenlooper that city council often chafes at their wish to have more power or to be more involved in the process, and I certainly understand that. But again, I think if you look at how the government has worked in the past few years, it's been very successful. In 2006, we looked at the way the financial system worked, and we had a charter amendment to create a chief financial officer. We had bipartisan meetings, we met with a blue ribbon commission of business leaders, and we took the city auditor out of that process because we were trying to make it less political. And that process has worked well with the CFO who reports directly to the mayor. Again, I think we should just have a conversation about why a change is needed. I just don't see it.
And Councilwoman Kanish, you now have 1 minute for a rebuttal to Mr. Finnegan's opening statement.
Thank you. I also agree with Mr. Finnegan that the city of Denver is very well run. But in our desire for excellence, we should never miss an opportunity to improve. We have seen that Mayor Hancock and his predecessors typically have had to propose 20 or more changes to the budget each year for either really big opportunities, like maybe a piece of land that became available for a park, or perhaps to meet a challenge to get more food into the hands of residents of Elyria, Swansea, maybe to deal with flood mitigation. To think that only one elected official has the ability to propose a good idea in the middle of a year underestimates the potential for the city council to be a stronger partner, both to the mayor and to the people of Denver, to propose good solutions to the challenges we face, even if they happen on a slightly different schedule than our usual budget.
Now for our cross-examination rounds, beginning with Councilwoman Robin Kanish. You may ask Mr. Finnegan a question, and Cole, you will have 1 minute to answer.
Thank you. So I would love to understand a little more about why it is that ideas from one elected official, in this case the mayor, have more validity and an ability to be discussed and debated in a transparent session of the council than ideas that might come from one of the 13 elected council members. Why is one more valid than the other to be discussed in the council chambers and voted on?
Well, I don't agree with your premise. I'm not stating that we can't have an exchange of ideas. In fact, in my experience in city government and in my experience in working with you, Councilwoman Kanish, plenty of free exchanges of ideas. I simply think in this instance, what has worked well and the credit markets have responded well to and the business community has responded well to, and what has served us as a fiscally well-managed city is to have the mayor working through the chief financial officer and the different branches of the government proposing the budget. I'm concerned about a change which would now permit city council with 13 disparate personalities and perhaps needs and wants to, in the middle of the year, make changes to that budget that may not be in the best interests of the city.
Now, Mr. Finnegan, you may ask Councilwoman Kanish a question, and Robin, you will have 1 minute for your response.
Sure. If this amendment were to pass and become part of our charter, what safeguards would we have if in the middle of the year, city council, perhaps in an election year, was looking at different needs in each of the districts, the 11 different districts and then the 2 at-large members, that would stop from the budget perhaps being turned into a grab bag where spending would be changed or moved through the use of a supermajority, as I understand it, which is what you would use to change the budget.
2G actually comes with the exact same safeguards that are in place for any proposal brought by the mayor. Number 1, proposed spending has to meet the rules for the source of the funding. For example, if a dollar came from the voter-approved parks tax, it could only be used for parks purposes. 2, we have to honor city fiscal rules. That includes maintaining a 15% savings account in good times, and it includes some restrictions on how you use that savings account in tough times. 3, nobody can cause a deficit, mayor or council. The city budget has to remain balanced. 4, council members can only propose a change after consulting with the manager of finance you just described as a trusted professional who has the opportunity to consult, give input. And 5, this is the biggest. No rogue council member can change the budget. Any change that's proposed by the mayor or the council requires 7 votes. And then if you do have a veto, it requires 9. That requires thoughtful majorities and is a lot of work to maintain in a disparate body like you described.
And let's continue with cross-examination, and this time, Cole, your turn to ask Robin a question, and Robin, you will have 1 minute to reply.
Thank you. Let's follow up. I'd like to talk a little bit more about your consultation with the CFO, because as you know, Councilwoman Kanish and I worked together years ago on the Denver Union Station Project Authority, and we had the collapse of the economy in 2009, and since we were unable to access the bond community, we were able to take the moral obligation of the city and county of Denver through its excellent AAA rating and go borrow $300 million from the federal government, which helped us structure Union Station, which has just been a great success. We did that in part because we had a CFO that we could work with. So you talk about consulting with the CFO. I've gotten the sense that the CFO is not necessarily in favor of this change. So how would that consultation work going forward?
Well, I would hope that every public servant working in the city and county of Denver feels accountable first and foremost to the people of Denver and gives all elected officials accurate information. I have always found that true by our managers of finance, both the current and the predecessors, and I would expect no less. If there is a proposal that has information that may not be privy to the council, one of the opportunities that this ballot measure creates is for more dialogue and information. To the extent a CFO feels that they are only accountable to a mayor because only the mayor makes changes to the budget, we might be missing opportunities for the council to stay apprised of challenges, of opportunities, of things that are happening. So I think this ballot measure actually promotes more collaboration with the manager of finance so that they can keep in touch with the council members and be sure that we are aware of what needs to be done to keep the city in good fiscal health.
Now, Robin, you may ask Cole a question, and Cole, you will have 1 minute for your response.
So I'm curious, one of the premises of your question, you've mentioned the bond rating 2 or 3 times now, is that somehow the city's financial health is put at risk if council members propose an idea that has to be voted on by the council or the mayor. So, you know, it's interesting, council has this very same power right now in the annual budget process. We can amend it. In 15 years, the council has amended the mayor's budget precisely twice. 2 times. Once by a 7 vote and once by a 9 vote. So I'm curious what evidence you have for the concerns that, given the exact same power in the middle of a year, that somehow council would take a different course that would put the city in fiscal risk.
Well, that's an excellent question. I don't know that I want to agree that I need to prove a negative. I would reverse that and say, what proof do we have that there's a problem that needs to be solved here? My point is, over the past 15 years, we have had a terrific rating. The credit agencies, and that's essentially like your credit score, like your personal credit score. This is the credit score that the city and county of Denver gets. And no other city or county in the country has a AAA rating by all 3 agencies, by Fitch, Moody's, and S&P. So my concern is, while we should always be striving for excellence, I also think if we have a system in place that works well, that gives certainty, that the markets have responded well to, and that we've done well with, I'm not completely convinced that we need to make a change to that.
And we move to our next round. Robin, you go first with your next question for Cole.
So, as you describe the markets, I'd like you to talk a little bit more about the people of Denver, because that's who I'm elected to represent. I'm not here to represent the markets. I'm here to represent you, the people of Denver. Are you suggesting that there's never been a proposal that could have improved the services to our people of Denver that might have been left on the table, that could have been advanced if the council had a little stronger ability to bring that to the table and have it brought to a vote?
Oh, no, I'm not suggesting that at all. And in fact, as someone who's been involved in Denver for over 3 decades, I agree completely that we should do everything in our power when we are working for the city and county of Denver to do our best for the people. I think in this instance, what I'm saying is it's important that we maintain the fiscal security of the city so that our citizens know that their tax dollars are being used wisely and that they are not subject to sort of the whims of the day. And I look at this proposal, which reminds me of when I worked on the Hill, on Capitol Hill in the 1980s. I worked for the chairman of the House Budget Committee, so I do have some familiarity with this. And sometimes the back and forth between the Congress and the executive branch resulted in real problems, and stalemate and chaos. And I just would want to make sure that we don't have that in Denver.
Now, Cole, your next question for Robin.
As you move forward, I'd like to hear some more about some of the guidelines or protocols that the council would put in place if this were to become law. What policies would you follow? Would there, for example, be some sort of level that you wouldn't go below in terms of getting into the reserves or the rainy day fund?
Well, the good news is that the charter and the policies of Denver already provide each of the guardrails that I've described. So the fact that any proposal requires a majority or a supermajority vote of council, that's in the charter. And that's written right into 2G to use that same tried and true democratic check and balance on power. The policy regarding deficit, this is state law in Colorado. We don't get to operate on a deficit here. We don't get to raise taxes without a vote of the people. So all of those protections, this is about when there is a new dollar that comes to the city that wasn't anticipated or an unspent dollar. Be very clear. Nothing in the charter would allow the council or the mayor to propose to spend a dollar we didn't have, or to propose to spend a dollar we didn't have permission to collect already through a different act, mostly by you, the voters. The fiscal rules are written into city policy regarding the 15% savings account that we have for rainy days. That's a fiscal policy, and we've been very clear that 2G is subject to all of the policies of the city. And lastly, these ideas...
Thank you, Robin. I'm sorry your time is up.
Thank you.
That brings us to our final cross-examination round. And Cole, you will start it off with the question for Robin. And Robin, as before, you have 1 minute to answer.
Could you give me, I'd be curious, let's continue on the vein of what you were speaking about. As I understand it, when I read this proposal, there's language in there about unencumbered and encumbered funds. So as I understand it, when funds are encumbered, those are perhaps contractual agreements that the city has or settlement agreements, for example, in the legal parlance. Would the city council otherwise have free rein to whatever funds are not unencumbered?
The only dollars that 2G would allow the council to make a proposal regarding are those that are unspent, which means there's not a contract, there's not an obligation that the city has already undertaken. I'll give you examples that come right from the mayor's own proposals each year. Sometimes a special revenue fund is set up for a special purpose, and it might have extra dollars done at the end of it, and we might transfer those dollars to a different use. For example, we have an environmental cleanup fund, and we've at times transferred those dollars to increase our composting in the city or to work on air quality projects. So there's no reason we should leave your hard tax dollars sitting in an account unused if there is an opportunity to, in a fiscally prudent way, address a concern in our community, such as air quality or diverting more trash from our landfill. So this is simply about who gets to propose that change. It's not about what you can move around.
And Robin, your final question for Cole. Cole, you have 1 minute for your response.
You've spoken quite a bit about what a great partnership there's been in the city, and I agree. I've partnered with the mayor on many things, including 2B on this very ballot that we're going to be voting on this year. But would you agree that a charter isn't about the people who hold the position today? It's about the institution, and that when we're looking at a power that is exactly identical to the annual powers that the council holds in the budget process, which the council has used only twice in 15 years, that it's about balancing the structure of government going forward, no matter who might be in the roles, to ensure there's a good balance between the two branches of government.
Yes, I agree. The charter should absolutely look forward, and we should change over the times. And we've certainly done that. I spoke earlier in 2006, we changed the charter because there was too much politics in the financial process and the budget. And at that time, we went to the people. I chaired that task force. There was a blue ribbon commission, and we went to the people and we took out the city auditor. We removed the city auditor from a number of the processes and put in place the chief financial officer. And that has worked well. And we should continue to look for changes that would make our government function better and do more for the people of the city and county of Denver. I think in this instance, we'll just have to agree to disagree that this is a good way to do it. But as always, I think there's good intent.
Our next couple of rounds will feature our speakers responding to questions submitted by our forum organizers. Each speaker will answer each question, and they will have 1 minute for their answers. Councilwoman Robin Kanish, who is here speaking in support of Referred Measure 2G, you will be first to answer. Would giving council members the ability to introduce supplemental appropriations or transfers at any time for their pet projects ever be disruptive to funding of basic services?
No. Council members may have priorities in their district, but I wouldn't call those pet projects. I would call them services to the residents of those districts. But the good news is no one council member gets to serve their district at the expense of the rest of the city. We have a process whereby you have to earn the support of 7 or 9 of your colleagues. You have to demonstrate that the benefits to the entire city, even if something is happening perhaps in a district, are important, that it meets city plans that are in place, that it's consistent with the approach that we take, whether that's on our parks and getting more access to people within 10 minutes walk, or whether it's on flood control and making sure that we're being consistent there. Those protections ensure that no one idea becomes law without really going through the vigorous vetting that the council has to do to the mayor's very own proposals as well.
And now Mr. Cole Finnegan, who is here speaking against Referred Measure 2G, your response to that question.
Could you repeat that question for me?
Yes.
Thank you.
Would giving council members the ability to introduce supplemental appropriations or transfers at any time for their pet projects ever be disruptive to funding of basic services?
Well, I think we'd have to look at each instance. Clearly, I raised this a moment ago in one of my earlier conversations with Councilwoman Kanish. I do worry that that could happen and be disruptive. Not because people intend that, but if you look at how the real world works and how the council does work, it can certainly be a messy process. That's government. And I think that gets back to the point I keep making, is that I think we have a very good process in place that can always be improved upon, but this improvement, I think, does risk disruption. And that's a prime example I do worry about in an election year in particular, where suddenly everybody has a pet project, and like the old appropriations process on Capitol Hill, which has since been outlawed, there becomes earmarking, and all of a sudden we have a lot of projects that the city is now footing the bill for.
Next question from our forum organizers for our guests, and Mr. Finnegan, you will respond first. You will have 1 minute for your answer. Will this allow City Council to play a more proactive role in addressing pressing city needs that might not have been known during the prior budget process, rather than having to wait up to a year for the next budget cycle to initiate any spending changes?
Well, I think that argument could be made, and certainly if you look at the current world we live in and the pandemic, no one would have predicted in February that we would be where we are today, with masks and Zoom meetings and all the things that have made life so complicated. So perhaps there could be an argument that council could be more proactive. I would also argue that if you look at what's happened since the pandemic, the system that we have, the mayor working in consultation with the city council, working on the budget process, has been able to close the spending gaps that I referenced at the beginning of this conversation of roughly $220 million for 2020 and $190 million for 2021. So I think the process that we have works quite well, and I'm not convinced that the proposed process would work any better.
And now, Councilwoman Kanish, your answer to that question.
Yes, the origins of 2G really were to allow the council to be more proactive, and I'd like to give you one concrete example. We did not expect to receive $126 million of federal dollars to the city of Denver, but we did, and it was necessary to respond to the crisis that Mr. Finnegan has been describing. Now, imagine a scenario where the council of the city and county of Denver has no legal authority to propose $1 in spending from that $126 million because it comes in after the budget is approved. In this case, we may share values. We have a concern about disparate impacts of COVID in communities of color. Council members at times proposed dedicated sites for testing in communities of color that would stay put so people would know they're there each day. The mayor cares about racial equity too. He preferred mobile sites that moved around. He preferred a centralized site at the Pepsi Center. Council couldn't propose those fixed sites. We advocated. That was the best we could do. It took several months, but now the mayor has changed his approach, but we couldn't introduce that change right when it was needed in the beginning of this crisis.
And that brings us to the end of our Q&A segment, and we move now to closing statements. Each speaker will have 1 minute for a closing statement, and we will reverse the order of the opening statements, which means we will begin with Mr. Cole Finnegan. You have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Thank you. And let me just say thank you again to everybody. It's certainly great to be involved in this process, and I commend everyone involved, and I certainly commend Councilwoman Kanish in her efforts. And we just have a difference of opinion in this situation. As I said in the beginning, I think the city and county of Denver is well managed and well run. And over the years, the process that we've used in terms of managing our finances and ensuring that the citizens are protected and that the public is protected has worked well. And in that process, we've gained not only a terrific rating, which gives us low interest rates so that when we go out and borrow money, we're at the lowest interest rates. I think it also has given our citizens confidence that their tax dollars are being used well. And I simply hate to see a change like this, which I think could cause uncertainty in a time when we already have too much uncertainty. But thank you again for allowing me to participate tonight.
And now a closing statement from Councilwoman Robin Kanish. You have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Thank you, Mr. Finnegan, moderator, and Denver Decides. We are one city of Denver. The mayor and the council are on the same team. We serve the same people of Denver. The same voters elect us. But on a good team, one player can't exclusively control the ball, or you risk wasting the unique, maybe different talents of the other players on your team. 2G guarantees all Denver's players follow the same rules, and they're tough ones. Listen first to the manager of finance before you get on the field. Restricted funds stay restricted. No matter what, the budget stays balanced. Nothing passes without 7 or 9 votes. Follow the fiscal rules. Denver will be even stronger if all your elected officials can be engaged in proposing solutions to respond to the needs of the people of Denver, and then debate those solutions as equal members of the team, even if it's the middle of the year, transparently on the floor of council, not as an advocate behind the scenes. Just as councils have done for decades in the annual budget process, without any of the dire consequences you've heard predicted here tonight. Please vote yes on 2B. Thank you.
On behalf of our forum organizers, I would like to thank both of you for your participation in this forum. We hope we've given you a fair look at the pro and con arguments for referred measure 2G. Again, this measure asks voters if the charter of the city and county of Denver should be amended to give the city council authority to initiate a supplemental appropriation or transfer following consultation with the manager of finance. Our thanks also to the Denver Decides partners, which include Inter-Neighborhood Cooperation and the League of Women Voters of Denver. Denver Decides is presented by Denver 8 TV. Remember, Election Day is Tuesday, November 3rd. Let your voice be heard, be sure you're registered, and be sure to vote. For complete election information online, go to denverdecides.org. I'm Micah Smith with Denver 7. Thanks for joining us.